Kiss my babies and tell them that they was born to win. I got some hurt on my soul, I know that God can cleanse.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us here today. I would like to basically introduce myself. My name's Kiana, this is AJ, and I have the lovely Fationa here. Our podcast is called Unbreakable Minds, The Unseen Strength, and it is focused around men's mental health. I decided to start this up. I'm a single mother of 2 children. I have a child that is neurodiverse. He's got Tourette syndrome. And I think it's important to be able to understand what life looks like through the lens of a man. I think a lot of the time, we as women can sometimes maybe not pay attention to men's mental health as much. And I do feel like I want to maybe raise a little bit more awareness and just move forward and see if we can try and open a platform to essentially have men come on and feel comfortable, speak about their journeys and just be able to move forward. So I'll pass it over to AJ and he can introduce himself.
Okay, thank you. AJ, Kiana invited me onto this podcast. I think it's a great idea. I don't really have any credentials so much, but I'm a man, so here we are. I think it would just be nice to just touch on some of the normal topics that I don't think are discussed often. And I suppose just as a man, give you my view on certain things. And I just think through collaboration and discussion, perhaps we'll hit on some, key points that can help people, address potential issues that they're facing.
Amazing. And we have the marvellous Fationa. I've known Fationa for the past 12 years. She's been an absolute joy to have as a friend. I met AJ through Instagram. And I think this is really good to show that you can build up, amazing relationships, literally just through a screen. So this is how I met him.
Yeah.
Fationa, as I said, I've known for the past 12 years. We lived together in our hostel in Harrow when I was big belly pregnant.
The good old days.
The good old days. And Fationa has 2 children herself. She is a psychodynamic therapist, and when this lovely idea decided to pop up into my head, I had a vision, and I wanted to make sure that if I did this, I did it correctly. I had the right sources and some expert knowledge to be able to kind of show people that it's not just going to be a podcast like your everyday. I think within the Black community, we do have a tendency to just talk about the nonsense sometimes. So, Fatty?
Yeah, I mean, you Kiana summed it up pretty well. So I'm Fationa. My background, education-wise, is in psychotherapy. I also have a background in neurodiversity and special educational needs, specifically in focusing with ADHD and autism. Two little children myself, which are a joy. And I suppose that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, but Kiana invited me onto this podcast, and I just thought it's a very good opportunity to break some of the myths, some of the boundaries, some of the stereotypes that we have in terms of males and mental health and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and many more things that we'll go into along the way.
I've just noticed we've actually all got 2 children.
We do.
Between us. 2 boys.
I think mine are the oldest, probably. 2 sons, 14 and 11.
Yeah,
Am I topping it? No.
Our sons are the same age, actually.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
There we go.
But you are topping it, because
Alright,
your kid's
cool.
the oldest.
Right.
And then it's between them,
It's like
me
a
and
mixture,
Fationa,
yeah.
actually, because your son's 11, my son's 11. How old is Lily?
Lily's just turned 10 yesterday. The day before, 19th.
Happy
Lost
birthday
track.
to Lily.
Yes, thank you. And the little one's 8. So have I got
Yeah.
the youngest?
No, I
No,
do.
you've got
No. Actually, my daughter is going to be 6 next month and my son's going to be 12 next month. So I think we're quite decent ages for our children. Anyone want any more?
Yeah, I do.
Jay does.
I do. I want a daughter now.
Time for a little princess.
Yes, please.
Shop is closed.
I hear that. Yeah, the womb is... I'm sorry. Okay, so I think how we're going to kick this off, we are missing one of our team members today. He's stuck. Good old train services, but hopefully we'll have him on the next one. I think we're going to kick it off. Just a little bit light, a bit easy. And potentially, as AJ is the only male here right now, I think just kind of like goad him into answering a few questions.
Yeah, feel free.
So I think the topic that we should start on, ideally, is what was it like for you becoming a first-time father? What was your journey like?
It was an accident. It was an accident. It wasn't.
Says a bit.
It wasn't planned. Should I say?
Okay.
It wasn't planned. It wasn't planned. I wouldn't say I was young. I mean, I was young, but I was young-minded. I think that was the thing. So,
How old were you?
my oldest is 14, so I was 23.
Okay.
23. I grew up pretty quickly, having a son. Well, having any child, I think it makes you grow up. But, before my son, I didn't have any responsibilities at all,
Can I just chime in there for a second?
Chime in.
I think whether you're a male or a female, sometimes having a child doesn't make the person grow up.
It doesn't always. I think for me it did.
Mm.
I mean, I come from the typical nuclear family background, so I had my mum and my dad. So I kind of knew what the family dynamic should look like. So I think for me, I felt I had to raise and lift myself up a little bit so that I could be an example to my son to that degree. I didn't grow up fully. I know that now in reflection. But yeah, it did grow me up a little bit. There are a lot of things that I had to learn and unlearn, I think. Yeah, man, it was great. It was a great experience for me. I think every first child or every first, when a parent has the first child, I think it's like a surreal moment, I think, that everybody faces. But for me, it was a really big wake-up call. It's like, all right, I need to get my money in order. I need to make sure, my living arrangements are there. I've got transportation. Just all of the standard things that I think we take for granted now. But when you have a child, I think it becomes that more pertinent and it's that more important. Making sure I had my career, moving in the right direction. And just making sure that as my son would age in life, he would then see me as that example.
Yeah. Good role model.
As a good role model.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I made loads of mistakes. I mean, me and his mum didn't work out, which also changed the dynamics a little bit. So I had to still make sure that I was still that father figure, but from a little bit more of a distance. Mm-hmm. I wasn't the sole carer, so it meant I had to make sure that I still had that ongoing interaction. He still had that input from me, making sure, things like parents' evenings and being present at, school plays and, just having that ongoing interaction, I think, is really important. And I think for a lot of people, we underestimate what impact that has on a child as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think we think about ourselves a lot. We think, oh yeah, I've got a son and it's great. But it's not easy because, in many cases we were a child many moons ago. Mm-hmm. But to sometimes think, all right, if I was a little 2, 3, 4-year-old or whatever, what do I now need from my dad? And especially my dad who doesn't now live with me. So it's kind of having to think in that way.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool. Well, I say cool, it was interesting, but it was that's what I had to go through. That's the thought process that I had throughout that whole journey.
I find that quite insightful because becoming a father at 23, as much as we'll look back at it now, and I think we can actually say it is still quite young in hindsight, because our mentality now versus when we were 23, we're no longer those people. It's worlds apart. I had Reese at 21, and everything you're saying is not what I had for my son from his dad. I'm definitely not going to sit here and bash him whatsoever. But as I said, I'm a single mother of 2 children, and I made a lot of mistakes. A whole load. But I've managed to look back on that and reflect and be like, okay, the mistakes that you make essentially make the person that you are now, I want to say. And it's definitely hard. So the fact that your mindset at that time when you were 23 was like, okay, I need to get my money up. I need to make sure that I have the right transportation, still be inclusive of parents' evenings, or, you know, at that time, I suppose it was also nurseries and being included in the selection process for the schools. There's so much that actually goes into being a parent that you can essentially forget yourself.
I'll say there's a couple of things here that's important though. I think one thing is I had a good network around me. This isn't necessarily just my parents, and you know that's good, but even my peers, my brethrens, you know what I mean. They were the kind of group. You know, they say you are your friends and all that. You know, I can't remember the terminology. Show me your friends. Yeah, that's it. And my friends are very much, you know, of the same ilk, if you like. Do you know what I mean? So there was that support mechanism that I had where, you know, if I wasn't sure on something or you know, I felt that maybe I was going a little bit off track, I did have peers that could kind of help me to realign myself a little bit. And I think the other thing is that my son's mother is a really good mother. Do you know what I mean? So she was, I mean, you know, we went through this transition of being together and then separating. But, you know, our son was always at the forefront.
Yeah.
You know, and so she was always ensuring that I was involved as well. And I think for a lot of guys, as much as we as the men, we have to make sure we are looking after our and doing our part, you know, you know, following up on our responsibilities. I think it's also good where, you know, the mother of your child is also saying, all right, this is the situation we're in. You know, there's nothing we can do to change this now. But we obviously have to look ahead and think, well, we're going to be involved and we're going to be part of this journey for the next 18, 19, 21 years and beyond.
Forever.
You know, forever. So we got to make this work. We got to make sure we have a good relationship. And yeah, she was great for that. Do you know what I mean? So I've been really blessed in that regard as well.
She sounds like a phenomenal woman.
She is.
And,
she is.
you know, I have the utmost respect for any woman that will try to keep the father active in child or children's lives.
Yeah.
Okay. With that being said,
I just want to, I think it's brilliant, your experience. And it is a partnership. I think what we also at some point will be addressing is that there's a lot of things we carry from our childhood, and that we, you know, for example, I would say my attachment style in that situation, I wouldn't want you to be involved because I can handle it all by myself. And it's not to say anything about you. I mean, I was a single parent for 9 years with my 2 children. And I didn't want any other involvement because I could conquer the world with them, and I could do all the assemblies, and I could do the working, and I could do everything. So it also does depend on, ultimately your goal is to raise a healthy child, one that's emotionally intelligent, mentally there, you know, everything's, you know, to round them off as the best sort of secure attachment style going forward. But our own style impacts what we do in that process, and sometimes we can't even see it until...
Quick question for you though then. Wait, did you think that maybe you were in that mental space because perhaps the father wasn't showing that they could contribute in the way that maybe you needed them to?
I think for me it was, I didn't feel that anyone else could give them more than I could. So no matter if the father was the best man in the world, the most caring, loving, whatever, it still wasn't enough because in myself, I could do everything. And again, you know, it comes down to how we were raised and how we were brought up. And it's, you know, kind of growing up, it's like you take responsibility and you just pick your socks up and you get on with life and whatever it throws at you. So it also, you know, it stems with that kind of backpack that you just got to get on with it. But it's ultimately, it's not healthy for the child, don't get me wrong. We all have issues, but sorry.
Do you know what? That's actually a really good question that you've asked her, AJ. And I feel like sitting here listening to both of your experiences, I myself have come from the nuclear family. My parents have been together. It's funny, I was speaking to my mum and my dad about this last night. My parents have been together for 43 years, married for 34. Yeah, I think married from
That's
34.
a long time. You don't get that anymore.
No, you don't. You don't get that anymore. And without them, I would not be here. So for me, coming from a 2-parent household, really good stock, great upbringing, to then ending up being a single mum myself, it was very hard. So I wanted, my children's father around. I was very open. I like, come, be active, be involved, more so in my son's life than my daughter, because he was around a lot more for my son, but it was very inconsistent. And I can honestly say, looking at it now, looking at the involvement that he had in my son's life versus my daughter, they're both great children, but I think having him in my son's life set Reese back versus where Ivana hasn't grown up with him. She was just out there.
Away.
Yeah, and I am a firm believer of boys need their fathers. But because I tried so hard to have him around, it kind of rocked the boat quite a bit.
Would you say it's because it was a forced
It wasn't
thing?
even so much forced. It wasn't forced. Unfortunately, like I said, there are some people that will have children and it doesn't change them.
Yeah.
They don't grow up. And like I said, I'm not going to sit here and bash him, because at the end of the day, when you lay down with somebody, you become their equal.
Do you know what's funny though with this? Because I always say, when I'm speaking to my boys and we're thinking about, all right, which woman you're going to, pursue and all them kind of things. One of the things that we always say is, when you're pursuing a woman, think about, is she going to be a good mother? Not necessarily just a good partner, but we should be a good mother. And sometimes it sounds a little bit negative in the way that we're sort of thinking about it, because we're saying, in a way, if shit hits the fan,
Yeah.
if things go bad, will you be alright in that, you might have this sort of broken family, and will you still be able to gel? And I don't know if women have that same thought process about men when they're pursuing them or not.
But are we speaking about it at this stage in our lives, but are we speaking from when we're younger? Because we all had children reasonably young.
Yeah.
Were we thinking like this back then? No.
Probably not, yeah. You're
We
right.
weren't. And I think that's also why I've started this podcast as well. Hopefully it will get out there for people that are in their late teens and in their early 20s to hopefully think about some of the things that we are saying, and essentially that you could try to integrate this into your thought processes and your thinking. This is really important for women. You've got to look at, if he's a road man, don't bother. It's too much hassle. Okay, and also whether a person was raised in love or struggle. That survival mode, oof.
Just want to come in on that. That can be altered. We don't want to rule them out completely, because there might be really lovely people.
You don't do that,
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you can't be defined by what your parents done and what their actions. You can't be defined and kind of be put in a box and say you're not lovable, you're not marriage material, because
they weren't lovable.
but they have their issues.
That's true, but they kind of.
And it's about whether but sometimes it's also looking at, can you do that as a partnership? Can you discuss things openly? Like, I understand this is causing you anxiety, let's work on it. Or are you okay to go to therapy because we've identified this as an issue for you? And I think it's, once you've had those open and honest conversations, if you're willing to work on things together, then that relationship can ultimately progress. If your other person's like, I ain't going to therapy, that's not for me, is that something you want to tie down into?
No.
I mean, when I think about it, I think, all right, I look at when I grew up, and my mum and dad, they've been together a few years, married for 30 odd years as well, and there were gender roles in that relationship. They were there, and my dad was more of the disciplinary figure. Both did it, but my dad was my dad. You know what I mean? If you're messing up, and dad's involved, you can't correct. And I think sometimes it's understanding that when you're entering a relationship as well, because I think that sets you up for what that family dynamic should look like. So you got to sometimes even foresee that quality before you have children. Are they going to be that person that's going to complement me, complement our potential family dynamic? and is that gonna work?
That's
That's hard to see when you're young, because what does that look like? And if you don't have that representation of a family that you've maybe grown up in where you can see that, where do you see that?
It's true.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny. Yours is different. So my dad ruled from behind the scenes.
Oh.
But the disciplinary
Puppet
was
master.
my mom, boy.
She good. She good.
Like I said, Fatty has been in my life for the past 12 years, so she knows my parents as well. My dad is such a placid man. So placid. My mum, listen.
Iron Fist.
Hey.
She don't play.
Yeah. She does not play. And I think, as much as I'm like, Mum, you were so harsh. If she wasn't as hard on me growing up, I wouldn't be able to do half the things that I'm able to do now. And it's being able to, I think, pull into that resources of strength that you've got within inside yourself to be able to excel. Because if I didn't have that upbringing, I wouldn't be able to be the single mum that I am now, to raise and rear my children up properly. They say, spare the rod, spoil the child. There's no sparing the rod in my household. I believe in emotional intelligence for children and being able to speak life into them. I'm not as strict as I was, as my mum was, but I am glad that she was strict with me.
Can I just say, Kian, that's an interesting dynamic, you know, where your mum was more of the disciplinary.
My mum's Guyanese. Hey. Guyanese women, they don't ramp.
That's an interesting dynamic, because, I mean, as a man, if I'm going into a relationship, being the man that I am, and kind of always been, but more so now, I would always kind of want that to be my position. Organically. I'm thinking about it now, but I think just organically, I see that as my job.
Why?
Listen, if my mum was to look, Dad, leave them. Leave them. My granddad was like that as well. My granddad was like that.
I just want to know why. Why? I mean,
Why?
Do you know?
All right, I'm one of four boys. I'm
Yes.
one of four boys. My oldest brother was from a different mum, but so three of us mainly grew up together. But I just think that three boys in the house, we were boisterous, right?
That's real boisterous.
Yeah, it's loud and we play fight and all that. And it's not that my mum couldn't handle it, but I just think that there comes a time where, as a mum, you have to realise that, all right, these boys are getting a little bit bigger and they're getting a little bit. This is a man's job now. The man has to.
I do agree with that. I'm not gonna lie to you, but it also comes down to your parenting style. Now, my son's getting older. I can see it already. The little side eye. Sometimes I'm like, "Can you do this?" And he's like, "Okay." And he's a very well-mannered child. But I think what I had to learn with Reese, is especially raising a boy with no father, is that you kind of have to step back a little bit, but you need to speak. You have to speak to your sons. If you don't have that male figure, you've got to be real and keep it 100 with them. You don't lie. Because when you hide things from your children, they're going to get to an age where they can start thinking for themselves. And they're going to be able to read between the lines. And my children have other siblings, really close with their sister. And when there are things that I can't explain and he doesn't understand it from my point of view, go and speak to your sister. Because she's been through exactly what it is that I'm trying to tell you that you've been through. So you're not going to be able to understand it from my point of view, because I don't want to be that mum that is, oh, you're keeping me from my dad. I've never done that. I had to ultimately make the decision to walk away because it was a detriment to my son's mental health. Now, his dad walking in and out of his life set off Reese's Tourette syndrome to the point where we thought it was allergies, but he started to tick and it was like a clacking sound, and I had no idea what it was. And every time I used to do it, I used to be like, "Can you be quiet, please? I'm trying to watch the TV." And looking back at it, I do feel bad. But then I saw him, do the standard that. And this was when we were sitting down and eating dinner. And I looked at him and I said, "You okay?" "I'm fine." But because it's just an action that happens like that, he didn't pick up on it. So I started to do my research and I thought, he's got Tourette syndrome. Went to the doctors, it was confirmed. And when his dad kept on walking in and out of his life, it's related to stress, anxiety. You know, he was starting to do that with his fingers and really anxious. I said no. I had to make that decision. And that Reese is going to be 12. This was 8. He was 8 years old. So from 0 to 8, and then I had my daughter in that time as well. She was 2. I did try, you know, and it was me trying. Unfortunately, it was a detriment to my son's mental health. So as a mum, I had to make that decision to walk away. It wasn't taken lightly at all. It hurt.
This is what I'm saying. This is where men need to think about what it's like for the child, you know, because I think there's the selfishness about that, man. It's like whether or not you wanted to bring a child into the world is a responsibility you now have. That's it. It's the bottom line. You know what I mean? And I always say this to a lot of guys I speak to now. I say, one day, it's going to come back to bite you. You know what I mean? One day you're going to get the knock at the door. You're going to get the question. And it's going to be either a conscious thing or something. But it's going to hit you. And you're going to see where you failed. And it might manifest itself in a physical way or a child's actions or health, mental health, physical health, whatever. Or just the general attitude or whatever it is. And as a man, you got to think about that, man. It's so important. It's so important. I think it's just disregarded, man. It's not right.
It is. And like I said, I haven't spoken to him. I haven't seen him actually since 2021.
Yeah, but COVID allows all of that, so it's okay.
It's
okay.
Yeah, 2021. I think the last time I had a conversation with him was probably 2022. And then it just got to the point where I couldn't speak to him anymore. Like, my body just said nope. And Fationa was around for some dreadful times that I had in that relationship, and it wasn't easy. And the fact that I still attempted to make them have a relationship, it shows my character regardless. Like, he'll probably see this, you know, and he might have a lot to say. If he does, you know where my phone number is. If I speak to you, it's a different story. But it's not something that I'm lying about. And this is part of the reason why I've started this podcast, because I want to be able to see, like I said, what life is like through the lens of a man. Hopefully somebody that does see this might have been in a similar situation to myself, and I'd like to hear what it's like for a man, essentially.
Yeah. Do you know what? You know, as I've gotten older, I've realised that I've started to lean further and further towards that old nuclear family arrangement that used to exist 40, 50 years ago, where even to the extent where the man can be the sole breadwinner and so on.
Yeah.
If it's that. And I think that's kind of had a change of mentality for me, where I've seen that there's a lot more, what's the word? There's a lot more onus, a lot more responsibility on me to make sure that my family setup is secure. So I think, yeah, everyone's got a part to play, mum and dad. But I just think that for a man, the family is, I don't know how I should describe it, but it's yours, right? It's
the yoke.
It's your thing, right? You're supposed to nourish that and help grow that. Yeah, the mum does a bit, I think, more from the inside.
Yeah. And
I think the man sort of looks after it more from the outside.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that properly, you're setting everyone up for a brighter future. And I think in some ways we've dropped the ball on that, maybe through modernisation or whatever. And I think there's sometimes a little bit of a discord with that, because some people say, well, that means that you're in a mindset where a woman can't progress and do. And I think no. You're taking it out of. You're blown out of proportion.
I think though, in essence, it's the society we live in, and that version does seem a bit toxic at times.
It seems toxic.
It seems toxic because you're asking for the man to go work, the woman has to ask for the money, the woman has to rely on this man, which they love or whatever, and then you get into a situation where there could be like domestic abuse involved, and this, you know, this woman has literally nothing because they're dependent on this male literally pulling the strings on what they can do. So there is that other element of that which is very toxic, but obviously if it's a healthy relationship and there's the communication, it could work like it did back in the day. But just with everything else that's going on in the world at the moment,
it makes it
there's
difficult.
a lot more.
Because I tell you what, I had this conversation with my fiance now, right? And I told her that, well, for me as a man personally, she's kind of instilled in me something that's made me want to work harder, to be more of a provider. She works and she enjoys working, but I want to be in a position where if she chooses not to, she doesn't have to. That's my aspiration at the moment. And I think that if I continue down that route, we have children and whatever. Obviously, she's part of my son's lives and whatever anyway. But my sons will now, as boys, look at that dynamic and say, that's what good looks like. So it's not even a case where, this is why I said a lot of people blow it proportion, because it's not a case where you're saying, woman can't do this, woman can't do that. But I think it's having the option that they can and they can't. And the man, in my opinion, has to be able to provide that. And it's not necessarily just a financial thing. It's I think it's a mental and conscious thing. But knowing that I'm providing a family environment where my sons can now see that this is what family life needs to look like. Because the reality is these boys that I have now are one day going to grow up to be men. They're going to have families of their own. How are they then going to treat their sons, daughters, their partners? They're going to look at me and say, this is the guide. This is what good looks like. So I have to be that representation somehow. And I think kind of just bringing it back to those, whether we want to call it foundations or back to the basics, whatever the term we want to use, I think that's so important to kind of instill the old values, if you like, to create better men. Because we've lost it somewhere. We've lost it somewhere.
I agree. I
do you know what I mean?
It has somewhat been lost. And I think a healthy dynamic, I love working. You love working.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to see money in my account. Okay. It's that sense of independence. But if I know that I've got a partner that is wholeheartedly going to support me in my journey while I'm working, and we can do this together as a partnership, but he in the background is also taking the steps so that if I do decide to not want to work, he has got me. But I've put myself in a position that if it doesn't work out, I can still look after myself.
Still look after yourself.
So I think as a woman, it's one thing my mum has always told me, you need to be able to make sure that you can look after yourself.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
Because if I had a daughter, it's the same thing I want for my daughter. I have sons at the moment, but I want a daughter, right? Because I got 2 boys. So if I had a daughter, it would be the same thing. I'll be trying to instill in her that, right, this is what a good man looks like. But you still need to make sure that you are continuing down your path, you know, whatever that looks like, whether it's business, work, whatever. You have your kind of thing sorted out, but you know what the dynamic of your relationship should look like. You know what a healthy relationship looks like. Because one day you're going to have children, and then what do you want your children to be exposed to? What do you want your children to then see as a good relationship? Mum loving on dad, dad loving on mum, loving the children, you know, growing up in that sort of...
But then what if you don't have that unit? You don't have the mum, many reasons, divorced, deceased, whatever it could be, dad, same situation, you're a single parent, you don't have that role model. What do you do in those situations? I think also in the current world that we live in, the relationship is not typical male, female as it was back in the day. So it's also taken that into account, and we sometimes can't replicate what we have seen or what we have, you know, what we have been raised to believe is your typical household. Does that mean it makes us feel less
valued or
less value, or like we can't achieve, this is the aim and we can't get there because we're not that typical target? What does that mean?
Kiss my babies and tell them that they was born to win. I got some hurt on my soul, I know that God can cleanse.